Everything changed literally in a matter of seconds. Welcome to NFL Nexus. I'm your host, and today we are completely unpacking a timeline that essentially rewrote the future of a storied franchise. Look, if you really want to understand the absolute deepest, most intricate strategies in football, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like this explainer, and definitely comment on what you thought down below. And hey, to truly support these deep dives we do, consider becoming a channel member. So let's set the scene, all right? It's the tension-filled 2026 offseason for the Indianapolis Colts. Now, this wasn't just another casual spring of minor tweaks, standard draft picks, and generic coach speak at press conferences. No, absolutely not. This was an offseason where the air inside the front office was just thick with urgency. The entire defensive identity of the team was basically placed on an operating table, examined under a glaring spotlight, and systematically dismantled. Everything changed. The front office made these ruthless, calculated decisions that sent absolute shockwaves through the locker room. Shockwaves that honestly are still reverberating right now.
Just pause for a second and let the sheer gravity of that offseason really sink in. You have to understand, in the National Football League, a defense is not just a random collection of 11 elite athletes scattered across a patch of grass. It's a living, breathing organism. It requires a central nervous system. It absolutely requires an alpha. So the crucial question that is just hanging over the entire franchise right now is this: who steps up when a leader leaves? Because when the man who sets the tone, the guy who calls the audibles and holds the line in the absolute darkest, most physically exhausting moments of the fourth quarter is suddenly just gone, what happens then? Look, nature abhors a vacuum, and I promise you, so does an NFL locker room. The silence left behind by a departed general is deafening, and trying to fill that silence, that is arguably the hardest job in professional sports.
And that brings us directly to the absolute flashpoint of the offseason, the blockbuster trade that literally no one saw coming. The Colts traded away their defensive heartbeat, linebacker Zaire Franklin, packing his bags for the Green Bay Packers. And in return, they acquired defensive tackle Colby Wooden. Now, I want you to really notice the sheer contrast here. You are trading away your undisputed vocal leader, the guy who recorded tackle after tackle, the absolute soul of the middle of the field, who literally set franchise records for defensive production. And in exchange, you're bringing in a 25-year-old defensive tackle to go fortify the dirt and mud in the trenches. It was a cold, incredibly calculated, and strictly business decision by general manager Chris Ballard. But here's the thing about decisions made in the sterile, quiet environment of a boardroom: they have immediate, violent consequences down on the grass. The immediate impact of this trade simply cannot be overstated. It ripped open a massive, gaping void right in the absolute middle of the defense. Because Franklin wasn't just a guy who filled a gap on a running play, right? He was the guy making the pre-snap checks. He was the one staring down the opposing quarterback, reading his eyes, violently sliding the defensive line to the strong side, and assigning the Mike linebacker to account for a delayed blitz. Without him out there, the Colts' defensive identity was stripped all the way down to the studs. Suddenly, the linebacking core is looking around, waiting for a commanding voice that just isn't there anymore. This is exactly the kind of intricate structural nightmare that can completely derail an entire season before the very first whistle of training camp is even blown. It's a terrifying reality for any coaching staff. They didn't just lose a highly productive football player. They lost their on-field commander. They lost the brain of the entire operation. So, enter the rookie. I want you to try and imagine the immense, frankly suffocating pressure of being the draft pick tasked with replacing a bona fide legend. That is the exact reality for rookie linebacker C.J. Allen. Listen to how he described his very first day on the job. He said, "It was a surreal feeling. You open that door, walk in, and it's time. You can almost feel the chill of the air conditioning in the Colts facility as he grabs that heavy door handle, you know? He's stepping right out of the amateur ranks and directly into the crosshairs of the NFL. And the crazy part? He isn't being brought in to sit on the bench and slowly learn the ropes over a nice, comfortable 3-year period. No way. He's being brought in to immediately plug a dam that is actively bursting. It's time. There is absolutely no grace period here."
So you have to ask, why him? Why on earth do you trust a rookie with the keys to a billion-dollar franchise's defense? Well, let's unpack C.J. Allen's pedigree. First off, he was a massive standout at the University of Georgia, which is a program practically designed in a lab to mimic the NFL. But even more importantly than that, he has SEC green dot experience. And for those who might not know the granular details of how this works, the green dot on the back of the helmet means you are the specific player with the radio receiver. You are getting the play calls directly from the defensive coordinator in your ear. The radio cuts out exactly with 15 seconds left on the play clock, and then you have to turn around and relay those wildly complex twists, stunts, and blitz packages to a huddle full of grown men, all while a stadium of 100,000 people is absolutely deafening.
Doing that in the SEC against hyper-complex collegiate offenses is as close to the NFL fire as you can possibly get. This specific, incredibly high-stress background is exactly why Colts linebackers coach James Bettcher backed him so heavily in the draft room. Allen already speaks the frantic, chaotic language of high-stakes football. But here's the catch. Having your coach's backing isn't just a nice little safety net. It's a massive obligation. And Allen understands this completely. He said, it makes you want to stand on the table for him and go harder for him. You see, Coach Bettcher's trust doesn't create a comfortable, relaxed environment for the rookie. It actually does the exact opposite. It fuels a high-stakes, do-or-die mindset. When an NFL coach puts his own career and reputation on the line to draft you, specifically to replace a franchise icon, you aren't just playing for your rookie paycheck anymore. You are playing to validate his faith in you. Every single rep in practice, every grueling film session, it is all loaded with the heavy burden of proving that James Bettcher was right to bet the house on you. Now, the linebackers were really only half the story. Let's shift our cinematic focus backward to the secondary, because the shockwaves of the front seven's massive overhaul demanded immediate reinforcements in the back. The Colts knew that if the front of the defense was undergoing this massive, volatile transition, the deep back end had to be absolutely bulletproof. Think about it. You cannot have miscommunications with your young linebackers while simultaneously having blown coverages in the secondary, especially not while playing in the AFC South. You have to face C.J. Stroud's precision, Trevor Lawrence's arm, and Will Levis's deep ball twice a year. If you mess up in the back, that's a recipe for giving up 50 points a game. Easy. So the front office went hunting for defensive backs who could thrive in absolute chaos. And that brilliantly illustrates the selection of safety A.J. Halsey, drafted in the 3rd round, 78th overall. But look closely at his background, because this is wild. Halsey survived 5 different defensive coordinators during his college career. 5. Just think about the sheer mental toll of that. For most players, that kind of constant scheme change, tearing up the playbook every single offseason and starting from scratch, is a massive red flag that permanently stunts their development. But for Halsey, it was a forge. It created a battle-tested, highly adaptable defensive back who is completely immune to playbook shock. When you've had to learn 5 entirely different defensive languages in 4 years, absorbing Lou Anarumo's defensive scheme in Indianapolis isn't overwhelming at all. For him, it's literally just another Tuesday. Plus, he brings this raw, primal element to the deep third of the field. Just listen to how he describes his own game. He says, "My instinct just kicks in naturally, and wherever the ball at, that's where I try to be." Let me tell you, you cannot teach that in a film room. You can drill a player on proper backpedal technique for hours, you can teach them strict zone responsibilities until they are blue in the face, but you cannot teach the innate, predator-like instinct to track a football in the air through an absolute maze of flying bodies. And the Colts desperately need this raw, ball-hawking nature. They need a player whose internal compass simply points to the football, creating those game-altering turnovers that cover up the growing pains of a transitioning front seven. But as we move through the layers of this intense draft class, another really fascinating storyline emerges. And this one carries not just the weight of a complex defensive playbook, but the weight of an entire city's history. The hometown kid returns. This is the story of defensive end Caden Curry. If you look at the past, it's perfect. A kid from Greenwood, Indiana, growing up wearing Colts blue, screaming at the television as a diehard Peyton Manning fan. And then, looking at his high-stakes present, drafted by Chris Ballard to literally bleed for the very team he worshipped as a kid, joining his former Ohio State teammate Jalen Tuimoloau. Look, it sounds exactly like a Hollywood script. The local boy makes good, right? But in the brutal, violent reality of the NFL trenches, a heartwarming storyline doesn't help you block a 300-pound left tackle. The pressure of playing in front of your family, your high school coaches, and your entire hometown means that every single snap you take is magnified under a microscopic lens. And the great thing is, Curry knows this. He is actively neutralizing the hometown fairy tale to focus on cold, hard, professional survival. As he puts it, I've got to do my job and I've got to make it and just have the same mindset. He is basically building a mental fortress right now to block out all the hometown distractions. He knows he cannot be a fan anymore. He has to be a merciless executioner on the defensive line. The nostalgia of being back home in Indiana is a luxury he simply cannot afford right now. When you step on that field, your only currency is performance. Now, when we zoom out from these rookies and look at all these moves collectively, the sheer scale of the defensive overhaul is honestly breathtaking. The Colts didn't just redecorate the house, they literally took a sledgehammer and ripped up the entire foundation. And the absolute core of that foundation, the granular strategy that drove the Zaire Franklin trade and all the subsequent free agency signings, was fortifying the trenches, the defensive interior. Because in the National Football League, if you cannot control the line of scrimmage, if you get blown off the ball on first and second down, absolutely nothing else you do on the field actually matters. When you map out this heavily fortified defensive interior, you really start to see the chaos organized. Look at the starters, DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart, two absolute titans of the game, tasked with owning the A-gap and B-gap snap after grueling snap. But look closely at the depth they brought in beneath them. Colby Wooden, Jerry Tillery, Derek Nottie. This isn't just depth, this is a barricade. The Colts front office looked at the brutal, unrelenting reality of a modern 17-game season and realized that just having two great starters isn't going to cut it anymore. You need an entire platoon of giants to survive the physical attrition, the constant double teams, and the sheer exhaustion of battling in the AFC South. And there is a very specific, ticking clock behind this entire strategy. 32. Just let that number hang in the air for a second. That is the age of both DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart as we enter the 2026 season. Now, in the trenches of the National Football League, 32 years old is the danger zone. It is the age where the cliff comes fast, and bodies that have endured literally thousands of high-speed collisions, absorbing hundreds of pounds of human force on every single play, just begin to break down. This single number instantly explains the urgent, almost desperate need for a dominant insurance policy. The Colts are terrified of a scenario where one of their 32-year-old pillars goes down and the entire defensive roof just collapses on top of them. And that is precisely why they brought in the veteran insurance. Let's uncover the specific resumes of these mercenaries. You have Derek Nottie, 130 games played, 249 career tackles, 8 grueling years in the league. He knows exactly what the wear and tear of a 17-game grind feels like, deep in his bones. He knows how to take on a double team when his cartilage is screaming at him. And then you have Jerry Tillery, a former 2019 first-round pick who generated 12 quarterback pressures in 2025 alone. These are not wide-eyed rookies trying to figure out how to put their pads on. These are grizzled, battle-scarred veterans brought in with one specific violent mission: to protect the aging stars, absorb the brutal rotational snaps, and keep that interior wall from cracking under the weight of a long, punishing season. But as we circle all the way back to that massive trade that started it all, we find the real long-term answer. The player acquired in the Zaire Franklin trade wasn't just another depth piece to plug a temporary hole. As the dust finally settled on the offseason, it became abundantly clear that the Colts had engineered an absolute masterstroke for the future. We are talking about the crown jewel of the entire defensive overhaul. And this brilliantly illustrates why Colby Wooden was the ultimate prize. Just look at his 2025 season with Green Bay. He is only 25 years old. He posted 50 tackles, 6 tackles for loss, and a very solid 58.3 pass rushing grade from the interior. He is the bridge to the next era. While guys like Nottie and Tillery are the short-term band-aids for Buckner and Stewart, Colby Wooden is the true heir apparent. He is a young, polished weapon who is actively absorbing the technical wisdom of those veterans right now, fully preparing to take over the throne when those 32-year-old titans finally have to step down. The Colts essentially sacrificed the present leadership of Zaire Franklin to secure the future dominance of Colby Wooden. So what exactly are we left with here? The 2026 Indianapolis Colts locker room is an intense, incredibly fragile ecosystem. It is a high-stakes mix of untested rookies like C.J. Allen and A.J. Halsey, who are carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders, mashed right up against grizzled, aging veterans desperately trying to stave off father time. It is literally a cinematic clash of generations, living under one single roof. If this chemistry fails, it is going to be a spectacular implosion. The complex void left by Franklin will just swallow them whole. But if the veterans can pass the torch and the rookies can process the immense pressure without breaking, well, it leads us to our final, lingering question. Will this volatile mix of hungry rookies and aging stars be the exact formula that saves the 2026 season? Can Chris Ballard's massive gamble actually pay off in the mud and the blood of the gridiron? Or did they trade away their very soul for a future that just won't arrive in time? The tension is real, the stakes have literally never been higher, and every single snap this season is going to hold the answer. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. Remember to subscribe to NFL Nexus, like this explainer, drop your thoughts in the comments, and definitely consider becoming a channel member to support the show. I'll see you in the next explainer.